Welcome to the Nerd Journey Podcast. Our goal is to help you, the technology professional, accelerate your career progression, increase your job satisfaction, and be more effective in your existing role.
We want to bring listeners like you the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers.
I'm John White at VJourneyman on Twitter, sharing co-host duties with Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_.
We're two former IT operations guys who have moved on to pre-sales roles with technology vendors. We have our opinions, but we also like to highlight the journeys of others and see what we can learn from them.
We'd also like to ask for your feedback to make this a conversation, not a one-way broadcast. Email us at nerdjourneypodcast@gmail.com or DM us at nerdjourney on Twitter. So come join us on our nerd journey.
Let's take a trip. Episode 290. Are the layoffs in the tech industry a trend that's here to stay? We sure hope not, but we've certainly seen a number of them over the past few years. Maybe you're someone who's seen these layoffs happen from afar and you're really discouraged. Maybe you're someone who's lost colleagues and you're afraid you're next. Or maybe you suddenly found yourself having to look for a job because you, dear friend, were impacted by a layoff event. Regardless of which of those categories you fall into when you listen to this episode, it's meant to be a dose of encouragement and advice from not one, but two experts on this topic. That's right, Kat Nelson-Troyer and Liz Bronson from the Real Job Talk podcast are here to share the wisdom they've gleaned from their experience in HR and career coaching. Be sure and listen all the way through to the outro for some free resources that can help you regardless of which situation you find yourself in today. Without further ado, let's get you to part one of our discussion with Kat and Liz from Real Job Talk, all focused on layoffs.
All right, we'd like to welcome Liz and Kat from the Real Job Talk podcast. Welcome to the Nerd Journey.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Liz, maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit, just give a brief background, and then Kat, could you do the same?
My name is Liz Bronson. I am an HR leader. I'm actually currently in transition looking for my next opportunity, but I've spent a lifetime in HR and recruiting, doing a lot of different startups. I had my own consultancy for a while. I worked at VMware for about 9 years as well. And my last roles were the VP of people at SupportLogic, which was a startup. And then most recently at Thrivecart. So all focused on employee experience and trying to make places a great place to work.
Awesome. Thanks so much. How about you, Kat?
Hi, I'm Kat Nelson-Troyer. I am a HR consultant and leadership coach as well as career coach. And I started many years ago as a recruiter and worked my way through HR and met Liz, my co-host, 20 years ago. I still can't believe that. It feels so long ago, but just like yesterday. And we worked together in a recruiting team, and I'm grateful that we've stayed together. And about 6 years ago, we started the Real Job Talk podcast. It was Liz's idea, but I think it was a pretty good idea.
And just in case listeners don't know, what is the thesis of the Real Job Talk podcast, ladies?
The Real Job Talk podcast is focused on providing practical career advice for the mid-career professional. So we talk about all sorts of things, recruiting, job searching, how to navigate transitions at work, how to navigate challenges at work. We occasionally do live coaching on the podcast, which is one of my favorite things that we do with it.
Both of us have been, really big fans of the podcast, and we wanted to make sure that we encourage everybody who listens to us to, become a crossover listener if they aren't already. But we also wanted to talk about, I guess it's yet another cluster of layoffs that is going through the tech industry. And we wanted to really kind of have the point of view of somebody who has experience on the HR side, from the career coaching side on a professional basis. Both of us have our perspectives, but it's really from the inside, as individual contributors, and, I'm a first line manager, but it's something that's a recurring topic, right? It hasn't seemed to end, and we wanted to kind of get your perspective on it. So I think we wanted to have, obviously a slightly more structured conversation than just, well, tell us what you think. So we wanted to do it persona-based, right?
Persona-based, yeah. I thought, ladies, that we would start with maybe having each of you give your initial reactions to seeing all these events happen over time. Then we'll talk about advice for those people who keep seeing this and it kind of weighs them down. How can they build themselves up? What about the people who have lost colleagues in the layoffs, whether that's a teammate, a manager, people who have actually been impacted by the layoffs themselves? They're looking for new jobs, faced with a severance package, whatever it may be. And then how about advice for the leaders who actually made the call that their company needed to execute a layoff? And then the frontline leaders or upper level leaders that had to do the actual execution of that layoff. That's the idea for overall structure. We'll start with that first one of just initial thoughts of what we're seeing in the industry. And Kat, if it's okay, we'll start with you.
We're definitely seeing layoffs. I'm seeing more in tech, but I'm seeing them across other industries as well. I'm most familiar with navigating layoffs in tech because that's where most of my experience was. I think that when layoffs happen, they're deemed necessary, obviously, by the decision makers. The challenge with executing layoffs from an HR or a company culture perspective is, how do you do that with empathy? How do you make the decisions, and how do you navigate the employee morale afterwards? And that's a super big challenge. And we've all faced that in our career, I believe. And I've seen companies do it really well, and I've seen companies stumble with it. And I try to look at those stumbles as opportunities for learning, as everything is.
How about you, Liz?
I think because there's so many different pieces of this, as someone who has run the project of a layoff more than once and had to lay off colleagues and friends and people I hired. As I said to someone who worked for me when we were going through it, and they asked me, does this ever get easier? And I said, no, and it shouldn't. And if it does, check yourself before you wreck yourself. As HR people, we hate letting people go, especially as part of a RIF, because we know it's a surprise. We know everything that's coming, and the best thing we can do as a company is to try to treat people with dignity and respect and try to help them as much as humanly possible, whether that's outplacement, whether that's resume review, whether that's coaching, whether that's a listening ear, but while also knowing all the legal things that are around it, but making sure that they have everything they need, they have the paperwork, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a really hard, both emotionally and work-wise, thing to pull off, and it's difficult. And I would say for the leadership piece and for the moving forward piece, and, especially from a leadership perspective, empathy is huge. Transparency is huger. I heard a story the other day of a leader who laid off a bunch of people, and I was like, well, I'm going to Banff, so if anyone needs me, I won't be checking my email that much. Yeah, that's not recommended. It's a hard thing. That leadership is hard, and hard decisions are hard, and you have to own them and get in the trenches and show some real gratitude for the people that have been with you on your journey, and do everything you can to help them on their way. And I would say, as line managers and people that are left, it's pull up the culture, be realistic, talk about how to move the company forward, and really have that forward-facing view is really the best thing you can do. But not put it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen, because it did.
I think in general, people are concerned that, this is a trend, or, just a reassignment of labor, or it's never going to end. There's a lot of, like a cloud hanging over people in the industry. Sure. Do you have a specific view on that, Liz, that just as an industry trend?
I mean, we've seen these cycles, right? If you've been around long enough, and all of us have, you've seen the cycles where there's cutbacks and then hire at all costs. And then, we've seen this before. Things change, right? When everything moved to the cloud, things changed. now with AI, things are changing. And we did have a scale back and scaling back of investments. And think back to the dot-com bubble, right? It's kind of an aside, but you'll get my point. So at the time of the real dot-com bubble, I was a teacher and I was 22. And I'm going out with my friends like, oh, I'm VP of marketing and I'm VP of business development. I'm like, how are you VPs? We graduated 2 years ago. And I'd ask, how do you all make money? That sounds like a cool idea. How do you make money? And they'd say advertising. Again, I was just a teacher. So what do I know? And I would say, well, is there enough advertising for all of you to make money? I'm like, yes, no, the answer is no. There was not enough advertising and the bubble burst, right? Back then was a huge change, industrial change, right? And so things got huge and then things scaled back and right-sized. We see that time and time again. And do we know what's going to happen with our company? We don't. But this is why as employees, we have to be aware. And, the day of someone working 30 years for the same company, et cetera, those days, we've lost that trust, right? Especially in tech. And so you have to look out and look at the balance sheet and look at sales and look at, have we missed our goals? Are we making our goals? Where's our technology going? Are we a one product shop? You have to look and assess for yourself, but also listen and ask the questions around the health of the company and make sure you're in a place that is going forward. We've got to be taking care of ourselves while working hard and taking care of our company. We don't have entitlement and we have to be aware of what's around us. But I do think that this, from 2022 through now, it's been a right sizing based on market shifts. And we've seen this before.
Kat, that kind of implies that each of us needs to do some independent research on our prospective employers or our employers. I think Liz was touching on that there.
Absolutely. And not only that, but especially in tech, you have to take control of your own professional development. This industry has moved so fast and it just seems to be moving faster and faster. So it's very important to keep up and to specialize and to stay in touch with the people that you have strong relationships with, that you've worked with in the past. Your network becomes very important. So that's, I think you guys are good at networking. But that's one of the best piece of advice I have for someone who may be new to their career is pay attention to the people that you come across, that you admire, that you feel that you've got a good connection with, and do your best to stay in touch with them. More than just doing a LinkedIn connection.
That's the most passive way that you can make a connection, right?
It's a place to start, right? But then you can stay, you can stay in touch. We know some people, who have spreadsheets and they're really good at, they prioritize relationships, but they use a spreadsheet to help them to stay in touch with people. And, the first time I heard about that, I thought, gosh, that's a little mechanical. But then the more that I got to know this person, I'm like, this person stays in touch with a lot of people. This person remembers things, is super kind, and hats off to him for having a process that works for him that helps him to stay in touch with the people he wants to stay in touch with.
A system for professional networking. I love that.
Yes. I think it's all about knowing what you want and making sure that you stay in touch with the people that you want to stay in touch with, and growing with the people who are, who have values that are aligned with you. Those are going to be, people that are going to be good fits to work with you in the future. We talk about, really knowing yourself in the career process, right? Whether it's job searching or even thinking about taking another move, you've got to be really clear on what it is, what your value proposition is, what you bring to the table. And in tech especially, you want to keep your skills up and keep your relationship strong, because this is cyclical. And we do see companies going through, big hiring. You watch the whole cycle, whether it's a startup company or a company that's got new funding for a new product. They'll go through a massive hiring structure, maybe overhire, and then we'll have to readjust. And that, I agree with Liz. I think that's what's happening, what has been happening recently. It's very challenging to be laid off, let's face that. But it's also challenging to be a team member who wasn't laid off, but maybe has, a half or a third of the team before. And most of those people are taking on additional responsibilities, and morale can be super, super challenging. And that's
Yes.
where strong leadership really comes in.
I talk to so many people who have survivor's guilt and they feel bad and why them and not me. And I've been there. I mean, I've been part of an organization that reorged every 18 months and I felt like I'd be the only one left on the team. And I didn't know why the part-time person was still left. Like that person's taking care of their family. Why not that? I mean, it's really hard. And that's again where leadership, transparency, empathy, all those things just come into play. But I think another thing that's happened here, kind of to piggyback on what Kat is saying, after COVID, everybody kind of went home and then and everyone's trying to figure out like work from home, remote, not remote. Ooh, this isn't working. And there was a lot of overhiring that happened because of things were uncertain and then things started booming. And so it's also a bit of a right sizing for some companies from that as well.
It's hard because you can see these things happen, the right sizing exercise. Mm-hmm. You're an individual contributor, right? That's the only viewpoint I have on it.
Yep.
It's out of your control.
Completely.
Someone else is making the call on who stays and who goes. Even people seeing it from a distance, they might get fearful, like, oh, it's out of my control. Is this going to happen to me too? Mm-hmm. But it sounds like y'all are saying that you can actually be proactive in this situation and, as you said, Kat, skill up, make sure your skills are relevant, make sure that things are up to date, make sure you know your values.
Yeah, make sure that they need you.
Absolutely. And Nick, I've seen you do this with colleagues that you've worked with in the past who may have, had a forced transition. I've seen you share their profile and speak highly of them. And I think that when you're in one of those positions where you did keep your role, that's a really helpful and kind thing to do to someone that you really believe in, right? To help to elevate their profile as they're navigating a job search.
100%. As far as working somewhere and seeing a layoff event happen, let's say you're not impacted for the first persona. Mm-hmm. As you said, you can do things for your colleagues. Mm-hmm. Is there a different psychological impact that happens in your mind for like seeing a teammate versus maybe having your boss be one of the people? Can you ladies speak to those differences and how they might mess with your head in different ways?
I think one thing that comes up that's really a big thing that's hard is when you're in the know before it happens. So sometimes if you're a manager...
It's the worst. It's the worst.
It is the worst, for sure. When you're sitting in a regular one-on-one with somebody and you know what's coming and they don't, it's the worst. And so that's HR, that's managers, that's, finance. It goes across the board, right? Because these things are orchestrated across the company and usually there's a cross-functional team involved with pulling it off. And it stinks being on that team. I can't say it enough.
The most challenging days of my career are days when I've been part of a layoff team and have to deliver that information. It's never fun. And as Liz said, it's not fun to be aware of it days ahead of other people because it's your job to keep information confidential and to move forward business as usual. That can be challenging.
Yeah. So to answer your question, we went around it because that may be a perspective that others aren't aware of, but it's hard when you know someone's on your team. There's sometimes that, especially with these larger company layoffs, the managers don't know, or it's the executive level person making the decision. And we've all heard the stories of like, I didn't know that half of my team was gone and I would have picked the other half. Like we've all heard these stories. And because you don't want word to get out that there's a layoff, sometimes people that aren't the best ones to make the decisions are making the decisions. So I think I go back to what we were saying before, though. It's about transparency. It's about moving forward. It's about working together. It's about repair. And you just have to be aware of what you're doing to repair your team or your part of the company or your entire organization if you're at the top. It's about repair and moving forward. And that's all you can do. And you can feel the feelings. Anyone who doesn't let people acknowledge it, it stinks. And anyone who doesn't make a plan for their team for moving the work forward with half the people and figuring out together what stays, what goes, what can we push off. If you've got 5 projects on your team and your team got cut from 5 people to 3, which two projects are going to be put on the sidelines.
Right, because you can't just burn through your team and expect them to all of a sudden go to 200% of the effort they were giving before, which may have been over 100%. I don't know.
Right. But also as an individual contributor, so a way to make yourself kind of stand out and be elevated is like, hey, I can take on, I know that Jim was working on X, I can take that over. Like, be part of the solution, be part of proactively thinking of how we're going to move forward and be successful as a team or as an organization.
I just want to speak to the question that you had asked earlier about the difference in different levels, being a survivor at the company and seeing, the differences between the impact of having your boss versus someone on your team versus a coworker. I think that can mean different things for different people. I think it really depends on the relationship you had with those people. But I also think that certainly there's more uncertainty if you lose your boss. I've seen that go in a couple different directions. I've seen people just devastated. And a lot of times people will follow their leaders if there are opportunities. But I've also seen people who it's actually worked out in their best interest that they had a new manager come in that may have been a better fit for them as a manager. So I think that as much as possible in this kind of a challenging environment, as much as possible to try to wrangle our mindset to see the positives in the situation. And that can be, so much easier said than done.
100%. Yeah. That naturally leads to what can the person who is impacted, like they had no idea this is coming and they lost their job suddenly through not necessarily any fault of their own. What advice would you give that person for moving forward? And I know John probably has some thoughts here because this has happened.
Take time to gather yourself before you go out and become a job searching warrior, right? Take time, gather yourself, update your resume. With Real Job Talk, we really talk about the importance of having a personal board of advisors. And these are people that may be mentors, but they don't have to be mentors. They're people who know you very well, that you respect, that are part of your team that you would turn to in times of career transition, in times of, maybe navigating a challenging time at work. So make sure that your personal advisors know and, ask for advice. Ask them to keep their eyes open and to make introductions. We advise people, when you are searching for work, it really is almost like a full-time job. So approach it that way. And we have several episodes on Real Job Talk that speak to the interview process up through also having a must-have list before you even do your resume, getting very clear on what it is that you must have in order to either make a move from your current role or to accept a new role. So obviously there's a number line there that most people think of, but we would encourage you to think a little bit more deeply about that and think about things like, what kind of environment am I going to be working in? What type of a manager? And go back through your career chronologically and, make a note. Oh, this manager was great because of this, right? Make a note so that you can set yourself up for these are the things I absolutely need to be able to make a move that's going to be a good fit. So things like values go in there as well. So I think it's, there's a mindset piece, and then there's the practical steps forward to do what you need to do to get the new role. I always say every email, every interview, every conversation, it makes you one step closer to the offer. Sometimes it happens quickly and sometimes it takes longer. And that's the challenging piece, being patient and standing firm in what you need to be able to make that move. And of course, it's a lot more comfortable when we're employed, when we have a role, to be looking for another job. But when we're all of a sudden out of work unexpectedly, that's where we need to push ourselves even more to take the steps that we need to take and to have the conversations.
Liz, do you have an opinion on that mindset piece? Because, I was caught in a riff at Google, I guess a year and a half ago, the 12,000 person Google layoff. I thought that I was fine, and looking back, I probably wasn't. I was probably angry. I was probably a little bit hurt. Obviously, it's 12,000 people, tough to take personally when 11,999 people were also let go at the same time. But there's got to be a process that we have to allow ourselves to go through, right?
For sure. And I will say it's not personal, except it is personal to you because you all of a sudden are doing a job search. So it's 100% personal, even though the decision may not be personal. I had never really done a job search until last fall, and now I'm doing my second one in a year. And when people ask what I do, I say I scream vulnerably into the wind all day. It's hard. You can't do it full time. You have to take breaks. You have to do things to fill your cup because the job search process, and right now the market is weird. I will tell you because I talk to a lot of job seekers. It's a really weird market out there, but you just have to pick yourself up by your bootstraps every day, put your best foot forward, do the best you can do that's comfortable for you while also being out of your comfort zone and rely on those networks. All the things Kat was saying, she's spot on. But I will say when my last job got eliminated, so I've had 2 jobs eliminated. The last one was a whole strange situation. It was a job that I did not follow my gut at the red flags while I was looking, and my gut was right and my brain was not. But I made, I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I've learned more in this last year of hard than I learned in any other year of my career. So I'm grateful for my learning and I can't wait to see what's next. But like you were saying, Nick, like at the beginning, I was mad, like angry spice, party one. And I had every right to be, because I wasn't treated well. And that I'll just leave it at that. But I knew it wasn't serving me. And like, I knew that I had to get past that. But I also knew I had to feel it and just be mad for a few weeks. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't. No one should get away with treating people the way I was treated. But at the end of the day, it doesn't serve me. And I am so excited to not be there and to be moving forward. And like I said, I'm excited about what's next. But the day in, day out job search, for me, the keys, everything Kat said, 100%, super clear, open to different things, being 2 in a box of I'll only do this one thing that's probably going to be tough, especially in a tougher market. But being open, but critical eye and with your must-have list. But the other thing is to do things that bring you joy and find the gratitude. I get to exercise, not at the crack of dawn, and I get to my desk at 10, and it doesn't matter. I get to volunteer every week at Dress for Success, which brings me tremendous joy. I get to do stuff I've been able to do stuff with my kids this summer that maybe I wouldn't have been able to do. I'm studying for a certification that I've always thought maybe I should, but why not? I've got the time. And I'm helping others. Like, I will talk to anyone because, as Kat said, every conversation, you're one step closer. But right now, I am giving away career coaching for free like nobody's business because I love helping people. Another thing that I think is critical is being part of communities that are your people. I'm part of a lot of HR leader communities and startup expert communities and other places where I'm meeting others that may be looking for me, but are like me. So I've built such a better network this year and had great conversations and helped people get unstuck, which is what I love to do. So it brings me the joy that I get in my job. And you just have to make sure that you're doing things in your day besides screaming vulnerably into the wind, because that part's rough.
Yeah, I suppose the lesson there, it sounds like what you're saying is experiencing your feelings is fine. You just can't let that experience of feelings be a barrier to do the things that you actually need to do to move forward.
Right. Being angry spice, and I'm in some support groups for HR leaders in transition and stuff. And the folks that are mad and just feel like it'll never happen and really going down that negative path, that's how they're showing up in an interview, whether they know it or not. And I will say we're all speaking from a place of privilege, and it gets very scary when the bank account gets really, really low. And I would say to people in that situation, figure out what you have to do to keep that going, whether it's driving Uber, whatever it is, part-time, to be able to show up positively for the jobs that you want to get. Leading with fear and anger is not going to help get the next job.
That's really profound. I just think that people who think that they can compartmentalize are probably wrong. So if you're feeling those feelings and that's the primary mode that you're in, 90% of the day, then it's tough to do an interview and not have that also show up in that interview.
For sure, because your examples are going to be the negative, and you're like, it creeps in everywhere, right? Which doesn't mean that you don't have those feelings, and to stuff them away and not feel them doesn't work either. But you work it out at the gym, or talk to a friend, or just get it past it. Talk to your board of advisors, as Kat said. She got a few calls from me in that first few weeks, and I was not pleasant to talk to. But you got to get past it to move forward, because moving forward is the goal.
Absolutely. And I had heard someone made a recommendation to schedule some time to worry into your calendar, meaning give yourself 20 minutes, every other day or something to worry. And that's when you can worry. And then the next time you want to worry, you say, okay, I've got that scheduled for Thursday, so that you're not spending your time kind of ruminating on all the things that you're worried about, because that is going to show up in your interview as well. That's going to cause stress. And then that will translate in the interview process and in the, just even in the talking to people process.
I've definitely done that with my work schedule, right? Like, oh, hey, I need to work on this project. And then I'll put in the description the things that I need to work on during that time so that I don't forget. But if I schedule a time to worry, and then I have an intrusive thought, pop up in the middle of the day, then I can just open up that scheduled worry time and add that to the list of things to worry about, or go, oh, I actually already had that on the list. So, that's not even an original thought to worry about.
If your calendar is a public calendar, maybe just put something like block time or something. Maybe not put worry on the calendar subject. Just if it's a public calendar, no one needs to know.
I love that idea. I'm going to totally steal that. But I bet if you do that and you put time on your calendar to worry, by the time it comes to worry time, you're kind of past all the things that are on the list and you've moved on. Like, I bet it actually cuts down your worry time to schedule worry time.
I think that's probably true.
I'll admit that I've wasted time worrying about things in my life. If I were to schedule it, I think that it would just be maybe a little bit easier not to worry on the times when I'm not supposed to be worrying. So, it's a strategy that might be worth trying.
I remember reading a book called Why Smart Kids Worry, and they talk about clearing your brain plate, getting it out of your head. That's what that sounds like to me, whether it's worry time to talk about it out loud, think about it, maybe even journal about it, get your thoughts on paper, type it up, write it out. I really like that idea.
Journaling is so powerful.
For sure. I meant to ask earlier when we were talking about the must-have list. So I can make my must-have list, but if I really need a job, does my must-have list naturally get adjusted? Am I firm on that? To your point, Liz, if my bank account is too low, what's the guidance there?
I think there's must-have right now and there's must-have long-term. There's must-haves and there's nice-to-haves.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be able to work remotely or in Austin. I cannot move. That is in cement on my list, not an option. But I could go in the office 3 days a week. I could probably do in the office 5 days a week as long as it's in Austin. But I prefer hybrid or working from home. But I could make 5 days a week in the office work if other things aligned with my must-have list, right?
And you could also do a little bit of travel on occasion too, right? Which you have done in the past.
Of course. Absolutely, I can travel. But I can't travel 90% of the time, but I can travel 25% of the time. The reason I'm giving these examples is I have a preferred thing I would like. But like, if you say you have to move back to the Bay Area, I cannot do that right now. I have children. It's a no. But my preferences and my nice to haves are different than my musts. That's where you have to be flexible and really look at, what do I absolutely need? Kat's heard me say this about 75 times. I had a career coaching client once who had taken the dream job that was 2 hours commute each way, and she had a new baby. And I'm like, why did you do that? She's like, it's the best. I love the people and I love the product, but the commute is killing me. I'm like, 2 hours each way is not the dream job. It's the worst job. And she realized her must-have list was she needed to be closer to home. So your musts are just the things that you can't compromise on, and then other things can ebb and flow as needs arise or don't.
I'm sure that there's something about prioritizing, right? It's like, here's the thing that I'm willing to cut first as my finances run low. And then as I get, things get more and more urgent, I need to cut this and the next thing and the next thing. And there's also probably something in there where it's like, this is must have except for this much money, and sometimes that much money is probably out of reach for any job offer, right? So there's a price for which I will move to most parts of the country. But my willingness to move to, the remote desert far away from many urban areas and, a place that's going to be 130 degrees on average there's a price tag for that. That's probably out of the reach for everybody, right? That wasn't a question. That was just a statement.
I think being clear on what you need, what you're willing to move for is important, right? If you're going to consider a relocation, even though it may not be ideal.
Go back for just a second to Liz, your mention of the job market being weird right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think that will level off and calm itself a little bit more? We'll have to cut part one of our discussion right there, I'm afraid. Do you have a must-have list like Kat and Liz were talking about? If you don't, they've actually templatized this list, and it's a free resource on the Real Job Talk website with a lot of great questions to help you figure out what needs to be on your must-have list. We'll make sure to put that link in the show notes. Also, if you haven't formed your board of advisors, that's another thing you need to get started on doing, regardless of what category you fall into. Maybe there's a group of people that you already go to in your life for advice on career and difficult situations, and maybe they should be part of your board of advisors, even if that's not what you formally call it. I would imagine that if you've identified your board of advisors, those would be some great people to talk through what they see as something you would want on your must-have list. If you're looking for more advice related to layoffs and the circumstances that surround them, I would point you to a few specific episodes in our catalog. Episode 237, The Psychological Transition of Layoffs, with guest Leanne Elliott. She's a business psychologist and the co-host of the Truth, Lies, and Workplace Culture podcast. That's a great episode to go back to. And in the show notes for that episode, it has links to a lot of other stories of our guests who have been impacted in some way by a layoff that I think can help you. Episode 268, Ownership Through Failures, an entrepreneur's take on difficult decisions with Eric Gross. Eric is a technologist and an entrepreneur, and he has some very interesting perspectives on layoffs from 3 different angles. And then episode 280, this is a recently recorded episode with Marnie Coffey about life after layoff. She gives the perspective of what it was like to be laid off and what it was like to come out on the other side of that and how her career changed as a result. A lot of great lessons on leadership in that one. I'll also say, if you're someone listening who has been impacted by a layoff, Al and Leanne Elliott, the co-hosts of Truth, Lies, and Workplace Culture podcast, they actually offer free career coaching sessions if you are someone who's been impacted. We'll put the links to get in touch with them in the show notes as well. So have you subscribed to Real Job Talk yet? If you haven't, be sure and do that. Don't forget to also check out the Truth, Lies, and Workplace Culture podcast. I think that's another good one to subscribe to. And for us, we'd appreciate it if you'd rate Nerd Journey 5 stars and consider writing a review. Share this episode and let us know what you found valuable. Next week, we'll continue our discussion with Kat and Liz with some thoughts on the current job market and some advice for leaders, all focused again on this topic of layoffs. We'll see you then.
Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at VJourneyman, for Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.